Environment Committee. I'm Councilwoman Jan Perry, and we will begin. Mr. CLA, are there any items for continuance or consent on this agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair. We'd like to recommend for consent item number 2, which relates to Victorville Transmission Line Project, transfer funds from DWP to the Western Area Power Administration for $300,000.
All right. Go ahead with that.
Recommend approval on that one.
Okay.
Yep.
Do it as a recommendation.
Yeah.
So why don't we go back to number 1?
Number 1. DWP report relative to proposed agreement with WASU Financial Services, proprietary software, hardware, and related services.
Good morning, Councilwoman. My name is Lance Brown. I'm the Director of Customer Services for the Department of Water and Power. This contract will provide a new sorter, a mail sorter for remittance, and the hardware and software maintenance for the remittance processing for the next 5 years. The sorter is over 12 years old, and the fully integrated system that WASA offers is preferable to the department.
Okay. Now, tell me, just for the record, if you can, explain for us very briefly the Image Remittance Processing Center and how it relates to the processing of ratepayer payments.
Basically, it is the collection of checks or remittance sent to the department. It comes in, the remittance comes into the department through the U.S. mail. We remit that automatically. All of those accounts are imaged, and the checks are received and given towards the balance sheet. And every day we receive about 20 to 30,000 checks by mail, approximately 250 million in mail per month.
Okay. Any other firm, was there any other firm out there in the marketplace that provides the same sort of service at a more competitive price?
No, there is not. Wausau Financial Systems offers that integration for their equipment. It is proprietary to their own equipment. Not all of the equipment in the Remittance Processing Center is Wausau, but a number of pieces are, and they provide it across all of the maintenance or across all of the equipment pieces for the maintenance and the software.
Okay. CAO.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you want to add something to this?
I concur with what he says. My name is Robert Roth, CIO's office. I can tell you that the system is critical for DWP's processing. They receive about 10 million, I think you sort of mentioned, about $10 million a day
Yes.
in checks. And it's important for those to be processed as quick as possible. This system is what's necessary to do that.
Okay. All right, so that'll move forward as a recommendation. Thank you. Item 2 is a consent item, then item 3.
Item number 3, DWP report relative to proposed water revenue adjustment factor effective January 1st through December 31st, 2011. This matter, the council started jurisdiction over this matter on September 14th. We have staff from DWP.
Okay, why don't we let Jack, stay there. Jack, why don't you come on up right now, Jack Humphreysville. And you wrote something after the slash, it's 3/W.
The RAF, the
Oh, I can't read your writing. I can't read it. Your printing is really bad.
Don't tell my teacher.
It looked like you wrote rat or something. Okay.
Well, there is a rat in this one.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank
sorry,
you.
Sorry.
All right, why don't you try script next time?
My name is Jack Humphreysville. I'm with the Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council. I'm urging the City Council to 245, the proposed rate increase of $21.6 million with regards to the water revenue adjustment factor. Essentially, we're being double dipped. Over the years, we've paid 5% to the DWP. They set up a reserve of $63.5 million. When the transfer was ruled illegal, they just hijacked that. They didn't hijack the $63.5 million, never told any of the ratepayers about it. I think rather than increasing the rates, they should use the reserve as an offset. As a matter of fact, the budget that the rate increases that the DWP got in early 2008, included, did not take into account the extra money, so they ended up getting that $63 million for free. We've been double dipped in that in order to help the city balance the budget, the mayor increased the water transfer by $28 million for 2008 and then bumped the rate from 7% to 8% for the following years. So I think it's only fair to the ratepayers that this rate increase be denied and that they offset the reserve that was set up. I would also urge the City Council to do two things with regards to the water and power. One is to get a better idea of the 8% transfer fee and how to make sure it's going to be certain and determined and certain that it's going to be paid. The second item I would say is the City Council should investigate having the DWP use financial accounting standards principles rather than the government accounting standards principles. The same accounting principles that apply to Edison and PG&E, so we can get a much better idea of what's going on at DWP. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Let the record reflect that Mr. Krikorian is present. I'm going to start our conversation with the representative of the Department of Water and Power. First, ask you to introduce yourself, and then I'm going to ask some questions to get this focused, and then, we'll take it from there. So why don't you introduce yourself for the record?
Yes, Madam Chair. Good morning. My name is Jim McDaniel. I'm the Senior Assistant General Manager in charge of the water system for LADWP.
Okay, so I'm going to break these down so we can build this record. The reason the council asserted jurisdiction over the rate adjustment factor was to better assess its impact on ratepayers. Can you tell us how the RAF works? And then can you tell the committee what the average ratepayer impact will be in layperson's terms so that we can convey this to the public?
Okay. The water revenue adjustment factor is one of several adjustments that are part of our fairly complicated water rate that I think you're somewhat familiar with. But one of the interesting things about the water revenue adjustment factor, it's the key component that allows us to have no fixed charge in our bill. So in our rates, our customers only pay for the water they use. It's almost unheard of in the industry, but it's extremely environmentally progressive in that it sends the strongest possible conservation message. And for our thriftiest water customers, they benefit from that because they don't pay this fixed charge for water that they're not using. The price that you pay for having a 100% volumetric rate is you have to have some basis. If you're going to be borrowing money in the market, you have to have some basis to show that you've got firm revenues. So the purpose of the water revenue adjustment factor is to establish a minimum level of funding. It's not the whole budget. It's maybe about a third of the water system's budget to assure the folks that loan us money that they're going to be repaid. What we have before the council today is an increase in the water revenue adjustment factor. Currently, it's at 6.3 cents. It's proposed to be increased by 3.4 cents per billing unit, which would, for a 12 billing unit customer, that's going to work out to about 38 cents or something like that on their monthly bill.
Can you express that in terms of a percentage for Tier 1 and Tier 2 customers?
Well, it's difficult on a Tier 2 customer because there's customers kind of all over the place, but for a Tier 1 customer, you're looking at probably less than a 1% change overall. Let me back up and explain why I'm talking about it that way. There's a number of other factors that are part of our water rate structure, and there's this water security factor, the water quality factor, Owens Valley factor, low income factor. These were already approved for a January 1st adjustment by our Board of Commissioners. Those have already been through the 245 period. Those are going to result in a net decrease of 4.3 cents. So when you combine a net decrease of 4.3 cents with the increase that we're looking at here of 3.4 cents, the net is that water rates will go down slightly, a little bit less than a penny per billing unit for the customer. So that for a 12 billing unit customer, it's around 12 cents decrease.
Mm-hmm. As part of its budgeting process, tell us how the department determines its annual revenue target for the water system. And basically, and if you want to use this as a framework, okay, how did you calculate the $379.9 million annual reserve target year ending June 30th, 2010?
Okay. It's a minimum revenue target, as you said. It's not a reserve. We do, and the way it is calculated is in the rate ordinance itself. It established when the major last revision was, the number was $325 million.
So is this a forecasted target?
Well, that 325 is written into the ordinance, and then every time the council approves a base rate increase, that number gets indexed by whatever the percentage of the base rate increase. So there have been a number of fairly small base rate increases, and that's gotten it up to the 379 target. So that's the calculation. It's basically the number that's written into the ordinance, which was designed to provide a minimum level provide a surety to people that are loaning us money, and then it gets escalated from there.
How many times, maybe in the last decade or so, has the department not met its annual revenue target that you can think of?
The water revenue adjustment factor, unlike the other ones that adjust quarterly, only adjusts once a year. Mm-hmm. The one we're talking about today would take place January 1st of 2011. The institution of it on January 1st, 2010 was the first time that the water revenue adjustment factor has been implemented, and that was in response to the tremendous conservation that we experienced with this most recent water shortage.
Okay, so then here's the reverse of this question. How many times has the department exceeded its annual revenue targets, and in that case, what was done with the surplus funds?
Okay. Again, the annual revenue target is not the entire budget for the department. So our entire budget is over $900 million. So the $379 million represents just a portion of that, and that's used to make sure that we have enough to pay our debt service coverage. Overall, what we do is we look at our overall revenues. To the extent that we need to provide additional funds to basically build the capital program that we have in front of us, we borrow money. So I think the short answer to your question is, to the extent that I hate to use the word overestimated, because it really is just a minimum target. We would borrow a little bit less money that year than we might otherwise have to borrow.
Based on what I've read, now that I think the department's rationale for adopting this rate adjustment factor is related to drop in water sales due to conservation. So if you extrapolate on that hypothesis, I think maybe we're sending a confusing message to ratepayers by asking them to conserve and then charging them to make up the losses associated with the conservation.
It certainly could be construed that way. The intent of the way that the ordinance and the rates are structured is actually to avoid that as much as possible, and I think that's why we're looking at such a small adjustment here. We did implement shortage year rates, as you recall, a year ago in June. And the shortage year rates are responsible for recovering the vast majority of the revenue that's lost due to the conservation. The water revenue adjustment factor, I think of that as kind of a fine-tuning mechanism. On the shortage year rates, what we have to do is we have to estimate what do we think is going to be conserved based on the program we're implementing. In this year, we targeted a 15% conservation rate. Our actual, and the way the shortage year rates work, you have to pick either 10%, 15%, 20%. There's nothing in between. What the water revenue adjustment factor does is allows us to kind of fine-tune the trim in between those, so that if we'd have chosen 20%, that would have probably been overkill. So what you do is you go a conservative amount, make sure that you're going to cover most of the revenues with the shortage year rates, and then the water revenue adjustment factor would kick in to fine-tune the amount.
How do you know that, how do you know, have you tracked the statistics, whether or not what you've done in terms of your framework has created an incentive or disincentive for consumers to save?
I think that we've seen a tremendous response to our conservation program. You know, our customers have saved over 100,000 acre-feet of water this last year, which
but this adjustment factor hasn't kicked in yet.
What's that?
The adjustment that we're talking about now hasn't kicked in yet.
Actually, yeah, it was implemented the previous January 1st for 6.3 cents. So that's in the rate today. This is proposing to have it go up an
Again.
additional 3.4
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. This one hasn't been implemented yet.
Right.
So they went into conservation with the understanding that the other rate was in place, but now we're adding in another adjustment, and so I'm wondering if that might act as a disincentive. Because to your average person, they'll say,
Yeah.
look, I tried. I saved my lawn's dead. You know, I didn't flush the toilet all the time, ran the dishwasher at night. I did all the things right, and still the rate went up.
I guess I would answer that by saying that when we implemented it and it went from 0 to 6.3 cents, we still had tremendous response and tremendous conservation. So that did not seem to be a disincentive. I do not foresee that this additional 3.4 cents is going to be a major inhibitor to conservation going forward.
Mr. Kukorian, did you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. I guess just to follow up on that point, a higher rate is likely to cause people of necessity to try to find additional ways to conserve. But there is the risk, I think, that Chairwoman Perry was getting to, which is that there's a frustration factor after a certain while where people say, well, I've done my part, I've done everything I can, and yet still my bill isn't going down, because the rate is increasing to fill the gap.
Right.
And I think that is something that we need to be sensitive to and try to figure out a solution to. But I understood what you said earlier, if I'm understanding correctly. The adjustments that have already been approved by the board, together with this one, the package taken together, does produce a net decrease for all Tier 1 customers?
For the Tier 1 water rate, that's correct.
Okay. And okay.
About 2/3 of our customers consume all their water in Tier 1, so it's a fairly significant number of our customers that will see a net decrease in their bills on January 1st.
And what the action that we're discussing today is intended to do is to produce additional revenues, which, you know, would be essentially revenue neutral given the other decreases, but produce a separate pot of revenues that can then be used for infrastructure upgrades and water quality upgrades.
That's correct, and it's revenue neutral overall to the department, but to how I can use the money, this is actually critical money for us to be able to continue our infrastructure program and our water quality improvement program. The other monies, the decreases, are coming out of our primarily out of the purchased water amounts due to the fact that we've had a good rainfall. So that's kind of it's a pass-through, so doesn't really affect me one way or the other. But to lose this 6.3 cents or not have the 9.7 cents, it would be over a $20 million hit to programs that are primarily focused on infrastructure replacement and water quality protection.
And just to follow up a little bit on the shortage year rates issue, so you have additional conservation, you have reduced demand for water because of that. The department tries to backfill that loss with shortage year rate adjustments, and then also with the how do we pronounce this acronym? Is it RAF? Do you use RAF?
Water Revenue Adjustment Factor.
Okay.
I'm not a big
So between those two things, you try to fill in the gap the shortfall in revenues that results from decreased demand for water. But yet at the same time, is it also true that in shortage years, you're having a shortage year because there's a statewide drought, there's greater demand for limited purchased water resources? I'm assuming that during those years the MWD rates and other sources of purchased water significantly increases.
That's correct.
True?
That is correct.
All right. So you're getting hit by the decline in revenues at the same time that the price you have to pay for purchased water
Right.
is significantly increasing.
And you know, this is not an uncommon discussion. In fact, I think almost every other water manager in the country I know of faces this same dilemma of asking for conservation and then revenues get impacted. But just if I could compare where we're at today compared to back in the early 90s when this water rate structure was put into place, we had a comparable, although not as large, conservation effort back then, and we didn't have shortage rates in place. And so we were in the typical utility mode of revenues fell through the floor when we conserved, and we were coming back to the council asking for a 19% rate increase. We're not in that mode right now. We're asking for, I think, a relatively modest kind of a fine-tuning adjustment on this, because the structure that the council put into place back then, by and large, it worked the way it was supposed to. And this water revenue adjustment factor is part of the overall shortage year rates. It's part of the 100% volumetric rate. It's part of that whole structure, and so it's an integral piece of that.
Right, now, Mr. Humperbill mentioned when he was speaking earlier, mentioned the 2008 water transfer to the general fund. Can you speak to that for a moment and tell us what that transfer was and whether there have been transfers in ensuing years?
Okay. We have not made a transfer to the general fund in the last 3 years. That is no longer legal for water utilities in the state of California to transfer to the general fund. Formerly,
that was determined by a court ruling.
A court ruling in conjunction with Prop 218. There was an interpretation of Prop 218. There was a question, I guess, originally as to whether water rates fell under 218 or not. There was a case called the Bighorn decision that decreed they did fall under 218, and that was the end of transfers. There were 2 years of transfers that were held in abeyance while that court case was being pending, approximately $60 million. That money, contrary to a lot of speculation and popular belief, was never escrowed or set into a separate fund. It was identified and set aside when the case was decided and the money could not be transferred. We used that in support of the capital improvement program in the water system rather than borrowing an additional $60 million that year. So we were able to borrow less money to build the infrastructure that we need to build. It's been spent, it's invested, it's pipe in the ground, it's concrete that's poured, it doesn't exist anymore, and that's the story of that.
Okay, but going forward, unlike on the energy side, if there is a rate increase on water, the department is effectively prohibited, and the city is effectively prohibited from using that rate increase to subsidize or supplement the general fund for expenditures outside of the department. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct. We are, and we do pay for services that we receive from the department. I mean, from the city, but we are not allowed to transfer just money to the general fund undesignated.
Okay, and can you, if we have limited time, but can you talk very briefly, sort of the 30,000-foot level, about the current water infrastructure needs of the department, what impact this rate increase will have, whether it goes forward or if it's denied, what would be the infrastructure impact?
Okay. The funds, the revenues that are going to be collected from this are going to be critical, as you say, to our water quality and infrastructure projects. Currently, one of the challenges we've had, and I've visited with you and I've visited with many other colleagues, mainline replacement. As we all know, I've been before this committee and talking about our need to replace more mainline. We're not replacing pipe as quickly as we need to. We had a very aggressive goal. The funds from this adjustment were specifically being counted on to support that goal. It's questionable whether we'll meet our pipeline replacement goals should this not go through. We've also got a $1.4 billion capital program in order for us to comply with water quality regulations going forward in the next 10 years. This revenue adjustment, as well as Quite frankly, I think it's no secret that I've said that we'll be back to talk to the council about needs for revenue going forward once we have our restructuring proposal. Those are substantial, and those are still in existence. And then the third priority we have is to develop local supplies so that we can be less dependent on imported supplies. We have delayed the program on recycled water to stretch that out to mitigate the rate impacts to our customers over what was proposed on that program in response to other comments that I've heard from the council and other things, just to try to minimize rate impacts. My first and highest priority has to be water quality compliance. That to me is not, we just have to comply with regulations. So that's the highest priority I have.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to ask you for your indulgence. Since, number one, we don't have a quorum. Number two, I have some additional questions that I'd like for you to have prepared for October the 5th, as I believe this is a time limit.
Actually, Madam Chair, yes, it's before the council today.
Great. Okay. So what I want to do is have you cycle back to question number 2. You can review this with Jeff Catalano and Rafael Prieto when you're done, if you need the actual notes. I wanted you to go a little deeper on the revenue target, and when you've exceeded your annual revenue targets, what has been done with the surplus funds. Mr. Cardenas is here. And has that ever been refunded to the ratepayers? Or I need to know where that money has gone, and if you can go back for, say, 5 to 7 years, if that's faster. I really need for you to answer that question for me, and I need some detail on it. Look at, again, the excess funds, the years when you've exceeded the target, what's been done with those funds, and where have they gone, and if they have ever been considered as a possible refund to the taxpayers. And then I'm still having difficulty following the logic of restructuring, rate increase, and the risk of disincentivizing, I think that's a word, disincentivizing the ratepayer to continue to conserve. So I'd like for you to be able to give me some more detail on that. That I need, basically I need some assurance that we're not setting ourselves up for people to say, forget it, it's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah. I mean, overall, the kind of conservation from our customers, so their net bill impact is in a positive direction, meaning down, far outweighs any negative impact due to this very small water revenue adjustment factor. So especially our tier 1 customers are seeing a net decrease in their bills, even though there's a small increase in the unit rate.
I think as we move forward towards, having a ratepayer advocate, having a bill that is a lot easier for lay people to understand, while we may not have a disincentive situation on our hands now, I think that's more due to the fact that people don't understand their bills and how to disaggregate the numbers and all that. I don't think it has any relationship to the fact that the adjustment is, minor in from some perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just more that people may not realize it. So if you'll give me more detail on that, and again, the point which is even more important, those years where you exceeded the target,
right.
I want to know what happened with the surplus funds.
Do we have time? Can I try to explain that to you right now?
Actually, I'd really like for you to just have it for the whole council, because then we don't have to worry. We're going to go downstairs at 10 o'clock. Mr. Cardenas is here now. He may have some questions. So it would be really great if you could just give me those answers tomorrow in great detail, so we don't have that time pressure.
Today.
It's for today, actually, Madam Chair.
It's today?
Yes, today.
Oh, great. Okay. Wait, today is the 5th? Yeah. Great. Okay. Why don't we see if Mr. Cardenas has any questions, and then you can answer them downstairs.
All right.
Okay?
Okay. You can answer those questions downstairs, but mine, can you answer them?
You can answer his now, and then
Absolutely.
answer my questions downstairs.
Well, absent having a ratepayer advocate or an ombudsman or a grim reaper over there, or whatever you want to call it, because there's been all kinds of different machinations as to what we need. Until then, there certainly needs to be a lot more dialogue in the open public discussions. such as here in this committee. So I appreciate the chairwoman's diligence and the members of the committee asking a bunch of pointed questions, but I do have a few questions myself. It appears that the adjustments are to Tier 1 and Tier 2,
Right.
but the adjustments don't affect Tier 3. Is there any particular reason why you stayed away from affecting Tier 3?
On the water rates, we don't have a Tier 3. We only
Oh,
have
I'm
Tier
sorry.
1, Tier 2.
Okay, I just assumed that we did. Okay, that's a good reason. Any plan on having a Tier 3, since there is supposed to be a motivational factor on, there is a motivational factor that we'd like to impose when it comes to usage.
Right. As part of our rate restructuring that we're looking at right now, that is from my perspective, that would be a desirable component to have as a third tier in the rate. I think, as you know, we're going through a new CIS system. There's limitations to what I can do with the existing ones.
Yeah,
so I'm
the
trying to
existing one
work
is
through
very good.
with the IT people, whether they can do the programming at the same time we're implementing a new system. So I would hope to have that in the long term. I'm not sure whether I'm going to have that for you right away as part of this immediate restructuring, but I think I agree with you. It would be a desirable component to have.
Yeah, one of the concerns that I think that was expressed by the chairwoman, and certainly is my concern, I have a funny feeling that tomorrow in the LA Times, if not already, and other organizations that their job is supposed to be to report the facts, is that they're going to couch it as though, and especially the daily news, they're going to couch it as though the Department of Water and Power is penalizing people for saving money, for saving water, which I don't agree with that simplistic statement. The fact of the matter is, in any system, whether you're running a supermarket or you're running a Department of Water and Power or you're running a company in Silicon Valley, the bottom line is, if you anticipate a certain amount of activity, you need to have a certain kind of activity going on, such as repairs, such as monitoring the system, such as having personnel handling matters, regardless of how much water flows through a particular pipe, whether it's 3% less than you expected versus the 100% that you projected. The bottom line is it still needs to be maintained. There's still a certain amount of manpower, et cetera. So those responsibilities sometimes remain constant, whether or not the flow of your product may change by a few percentage points. Is that correct?
That's correct. And in most utilities, they deal with that by having a fixed charge on a bill. I discussed this a little bit before you arrived, but in most utilities, in fact, almost all utilities have a fairly significant fixed charge on their bill. We've avoided doing that in order to send a stronger conservation signal to our customers, but the price that you pay in rate design for having a 100% volumetric rate is you have to have some mechanism to ensure that those people who are loaning you hundreds of millions of dollars are going to eventually get repaid. So we have, base rates, and we have all the pass-throughs. And the people who look at that and loan us money say, okay, these pass-throughs, maybe you're going to do that, maybe you don't. That program may come, that program may go. But we look at what are you collecting in base rates. We want to make sure that in your base rates, you're going to collect enough so that we're going to get repaid. So that's why the revenue target is targeted at the base rate, and that doesn't include all the pass-through stuff. The total amount of revenue that comes into the department is all used for operations, but there's a financial calculation that's done on this targeted base rate revenue to ensure that we can meet our debt service obligations primarily. So it's not a matter of, well, if we exceed that, then we've got extra money laying around. The total amount of money goes into the operations.
Speaking, how old is the water department of Water and Power?
Well,
roughly.
we've
For the nearest 10 years, isn't it 100?
I'm about 100 years old as a city department.
100 years
yes.
old. Now, whether it's an aqueduct that's about 100 years old, or perhaps some piping underneath our feet that might be 90 years old, 70 years old, 60, 50, 40, 30, 10 years old, either way, there's a certain amount of infrastructure responsibility that no organization, nobody can get around. It has to be facilitated.
That's correct.
And that takes money, correct?
Correct.
Now, if we were to go ahead and shy away from worrying about such newspaper articles or such reporting saying, it's real simple, folks. The Department of Water and Power duped you. They got you to go ahead and save water, conserve water, and then all of a sudden they're raising your rates because you saved water. Are we raising rates because people saved water, or are we raising rates because there's a certain amount of revenue required in order to run the system?
It would be the latter.
Okay, so if there's a certain amount of revenue required to run the system, where else do we get our money at the end of the day other than through the owner's bill and the user's bill?
Primarily the only other place that we can get money is we borrow money from...
No, hold on a second. I said at the end of the day. So we borrow money. Does the city general fund pay back that interest on that money, or is it still the same billing system, the same users?
It's the users.
So we have what you call a closed-end system. We don't have a magical source of funds. The source of funds with the Department of Water and Power is basically rests in one source and one source only.
That would be correct.
And that is?
The ratepayer.
The ratepayer. So the bottom line is, if the ratepayer uses less water or uses electricity or uses more water or more electricity, the bottom line is, in order to balance the books, a certain amount of money needs to be collected.
That's correct. And we try to do that in such a manner to incentivize wise use of water and efficient use of water. But in the end, the revenue needs to be collected.
Did we have any surprises in the last 12 months as far as any ruptures in our water lines or any of course we forecast for interruptions and things like that, but did any of those things occur in the last 12 months? Where money had to be spent over and above the basic systems running perfectly and everything, we're just doing things exactly as planned?
Of course, a year ago, September, we had the large cold water break and then the series of breaks that immediately followed that. Things have calmed down somewhat, but overall, our overall repairs have been pretty much in line with budget.
So basically, to project the going forward 12 months budget as you do, and you were off a little bit, that's why you have to raise it to make up the difference and balance it out. To do that, is that a simple science, or is it something that's somewhat subjective and it really can't be predicted down to the last $1 million?
It cannot be predicted down to the last $1 million.
Not that accurately, correct?
We do the best that we can, but we've never implemented 2-day-a-week watering, for instance, which we had in the city. That we had no experience with that, so we did the best we can. People actually responded better than we thought they would. So.
Mm-hmm. So, if in the future, for some reason, the books were robust or what have you, does it allow us to adjust the rates down? Is there any mechanism that allows us to adjust any portion of our rates down?
There can always be, the Board of Commissioners can initiate any sort of rate action. They can.
Whether it be temporary reduction, long-term reduction, permanent rate reduction, or what have you, right? It can be done.
Yeah, specifically the thing that we're talking about now, the water revenue adjustment factor gets looked at every year, and there's a calculation that gets done. If there's base rate revenue to meet that minimum revenue target, then the water revenue factor is 0, and so that would go away.
Yeah, and Madam Chairwoman, the reason why I wanted to make sure we had that dialogue on the public record is because I think it's unfortunate when any entity, be it official or unofficial, tries to dumb down and simplify and soundbite the actions, be it the actions of the Water and Power Board, whether it be the actions of the council or the mayor or what have you. I think it's unfortunate because I think it sends the wrong well, I was going to say truth, but it's the wrong truth. It's not the truth, but it sends the wrong supposed facts to the public. So I appreciate the report, and I appreciate that the Department of Water and Power, although not perfect, there's still some I think some fine-tuned information that we should be able to get. And again, Chairwoman, thank you for pointing some of those things out so that the department could go ahead and communicate with the public, the ratepayer, the owner, and also with the council and everybody in this building as well, so that when we get down to these things, we don't find ourselves defending something based on some simplistic sound bites trying to sidetrack the fact that it was well thought out, and this is just what's going to have to be done. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
You're welcome. Thank you. We're going to go downstairs, and what I'm going to say at this point is, if the committee members agree with me, I would like to forward this without recommendation. And when I get downstairs, is there a CAO report on this? Okay, and then do you know why there's no CAO report on this? Okay, all right. I am going to make a motion downstairs to ask the board to address any financial revenue target discrepancies between shortage year rates for the water rate, and shortage year rates and the water rate adjustment factor through water rate restructuring. Okay?
Okay.
I'm going to ask the CLA to get that motion ready for tomorrow, for 10 o'clock. And then I actually think, do you think, can we do it in less time than 60 days?
Yeah, certainly. Well, it depends on, actually, the department if they can report
Do you
back.
think we could get this done before Thanksgiving?
The restructuring?
No, the information that we need. You know, the earlier question that I raised about the clarification of when you exceeded your targets, what happened to the money?
Certainly, we could get that before Thanksgiving.
So I'm trying to make it happen sooner rather than later. So again, I'll do the motion downstairs, requesting the board to address any financial revenue target discrepancies between shortage year rates and the water rate adjustment factor through water rate restructuring. And then I'd like to, I don't know what that works out to in terms of before Thanksgiving. What would that be, like 3 weeks, 21 days, something like that?
Yeah, we'd have to
We'll
check
figure
on
it. We'll figure out the amount of days. But that's what I'd like to recommend, unless somebody has an objection to that.
Just a question, Madam Chair. So would that mean that the recommendation would be to disapprove the board's findings for now, and then we'll revisit it later? I guess the question I would have would be, in that interim period, when we dealt with this with energy, it was a big fire drill thing, and there were lots of things said about the world coming to an end if we did this. Is there anything imminent that, you know, would be critically impacted by a brief delay like that which the chair is talking about, so that we can actually dig into some of the facts on this?
There's probably some hiring decisions that may have to be deferred. There's backfills of.
That's why I want to shorten the time.
Yeah.
I don't want to go for 60 days. If we can get it done, if you think you can get it done in 3 weeks, or you think you can get it done in 14 days.
I mean, what we will have for you is a report back, a better explanation apparently that I'm able to give you today, and trying to reconcile that for you. But I will not have restructured rates by then. I just want to make sure that.
No, I understand.
Okay.
I just want to see where the excess went, where it was put. Okay, on those years when we exceeded the target.
Right.
Okay? All right, and then we'll do that downstairs. We'll have it ready downstairs, and we'll shorten the time. If you...
The only thing on this particular, like I said, this particular adjustment, unlike the other ones that adjust quarterly, this one only adjusts once a year.
Yeah.
So we have to have a final action by the first of the year. Otherwise, we've...
Well, I think we can do that.
So,
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem.
okay.
Also, one more question. If you could get back to us along with that information, could you remind us what the estimated value of the water system is, just in gross figures and billions of dollars? Because I think it's important that we put things into perspective. You know, somebody might be envisioning in their mind is like, well, when I call a plumber, it's $180 to, you know, fix a broken pipe. We are dealing with a very complicated, different system. And one of the things that is lost on the public is the only party involved in the delivery of water and power in this city, the only party that is responsible for reliability, the only party is the Department of Water and Power. In order to meet that reliability demand and responsibility and requirement, the department has to make sure that they are literally pumping on all cylinders. And if the department doesn't, it's not funny. We step backwards financially when that happens, correct? Not only economically with the economic effects in the community, but the department ends up spending more money by doing more emergency type repairs, et cetera, using one example, versus having things scheduled out, knowing that a system of our age and the system as it is requires a lot of reinvestment. Right. On any given day, correct?
You're exactly right. I mean, and we take this very seriously. I wouldn't be coming here today to you if this wasn't important to us. I mean, it's very important to the system.
But that part never makes it in newspaper articles. They never talk about how old or extensive our system is and how reliable we happen to be.
Okay. CLA's recommended that we take an action here in the committee, and so my recommended action would be to vote to disapprove, and then we'll do the motion downstairs, and if you both are interested in signing on to it after it's drafted, I'll make sure that they bring it over to you and let you take a look at it. So if we can do that without objection. Without objection? All right, thank you. This is the time for public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Feel free to come forward and comment on any items that are not on the agenda. Otherwise, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.